This city has more millionaires than any other place on planet Earth. 384,500 of them, 66 billionaires, a $2.6 trillion economy, bigger than the entire country of South Korea. And yet, this same city cannot pay its own bills. It's staring at a $10 billion hole in its budget. Half of its renters are being crushed by housing costs. And over the last decade, $111 billion in income simply walked out the door, straight to Florida and Texas. But here's the part nobody tells you. Scientists have already measured the water rising around Manhattan. They know how high it will get. They know when. And the plan to stop it costs $52 billion, and it isn't even funded yet. So the question is simple. By 2036, just 10 years from now, is New York still the capital of the world? Or is it a sinking empire living off its own legend? In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the real numbers. The ones that made me completely change my mind about this city. And the most shocking number of all, it's not about money. It's not about crime. It's not even about the water. It comes at the very end of this video, and it flips this entire story upside down. Let's go. To understand where New York is heading, you first need to understand what it actually is right now, because the scale of this city breaks people's brains. The New York metro area produces over $2.6 trillion a year. That's not a state economy. That's not even most countries. If New York were a nation, it would be roughly the 8th largest economy on Earth. One city region, 9% of the entire American economy, and the money machine at the center of it is still running hotter than ever. In 2024, Wall Street didn't just have a good year, it had a historic one. Profits jumped 90% to almost $50 billion. The bonus pool hit $47.5 billion, the largest ever recorded since they started counting in 1987. The average bonus? $244,700. Not the average salary, the average bonus. The average salary in the securities industry is over $500,000 a year, 5 times what a normal private sector worker in the city makes. And in 2025, they broke the record again. 49 Fortune 500 companies call New York home. That's more than double second-place Chicago. JP Morgan just moved thousands of employees into a brand new 60-story tower in Midtown. Google, Amazon, OpenAI, all expanding. Venture capital poured $28.4 billion into New York startups in a single year, second only to Silicon Valley itself. And the world keeps coming. 64.5 million visitors in 1 year, $79 billion in economic impact. Broadway just had the highest grossing season in its entire history, hotels running at 84% occupancy at $300 a night. On paper, this is not a city in decline. This is an empire at its absolute peak. But every empire has a crack, and New York's crack is getting wider every single month. Here's the number that should terrify you if you live there. The median asking rent in Manhattan just hit $4,722 a month, a record. Not for a luxury penthouse, the median, the middle of the market. To rent an average apartment in this city without being classified as rent-burdened, you need to earn roughly $140,000 a year. More than half of all New York renters, 52%, are already past that line, handing over more than a third of everything they make just to keep a roof over their heads. And here's why it's not getting better. Between 2010 and 2023, jobs in New York grew 22%. Housing grew 4%. Read that again. 22% more jobs, 4% more homes. That's not a housing market, that's a slow-motion collision. And in early 2025, new apartment construction didn't speed up. It collapsed, dropping more than 70% below the 10-year average. So what do people do when they can't afford to stay? They leave, and they take their money with them. Over 1 decade, New York State lost $111 billion in income to other states. Florida gained $196 billion in the same period. In one recent year alone, $10 billion in income packed up and left. And here's the detail that should worry City Hall the most. The people leaving aren't retirees. The biggest outflow is people aged 26 to 44. The workers, the parents, the future tax base. In the most recent count, over 74,000 more tax returns left than arrived. Now connect the dots. Fewer high earners means less tax revenue. Less tax revenue means budget holes. And the holes are already here. The city's own comptroller projected a $10.4 billion gap for fiscal year 2027, the worst shortfall discovered this late in a budget cycle since the Great Recession. On top of that, the migrant crisis cost the city $3.75 billion in a single year at its peak. At some points, New York was spending more on asylum seekers than on its entire fire department. And the office towers? At the worst point, more than 1 out of every 5 square feet of Manhattan office space sat completely empty. Record vacancy, entire buildings, dark, money problems, people problems, housing problems. And you'd think that's the worst of it. It's not. Because there's one problem in New York that doesn't care about elections, doesn't respond to tax cuts, and cannot be negotiated with: the water. In 2012, Hurricane Sandy flooded 17% of New York City. 44 people died, $19 billion in damage. The subway drowned, Lower Manhattan went black. And here's what the scientists say now. Sandy wasn't the exception, it was the preview. The official projections say the sea around Manhattan will rise between 11 and 24 inches by the 2050s. The high-end estimate is over 30 inches. And sunny day flooding, streets underwater with no storm at all, is projected to jump from about 10 days a year to as many as 85 days a year by the 2040s. Almost 1 day in 4. The response? The Army Corps of Engineers has designed a colossal defense system. 12 massive movable sea gates and over 41 miles of barriers wrapped around the city. The price tag? $52 billion. Construction was expected to start around 2030 and take 14 years to finish. Do the math. In 2036, if everything goes perfectly, New York will be a construction site racing against the ocean, only halfway done. And right now, the project isn't even fully funded. It's a proposal, a blueprint, a promise. So that's the case against New York. Bleeding money, bleeding people, unaffordable, and slowly sinking. Case closed, right? Not so fast. Because now I have to show you the other side of this story, and this is where things get genuinely strange. Remember the urban doom loop? Back in 2020, every expert on the internet declared New York finished. Remote work would empty the towers. Everyone would flee to Austin and Miami. Well, 2026 called. Austin's venture capital funding has crashed to under 2% of the national total. Miami's fell 65% from its peak. The great challengers faded. Meanwhile, urbanists now describe Miami not as New York's rival, but as its satellite. The doom loop didn't loop, it fizzled. Then there's crime. Ask anyone what they think about safety in New York and you'll hear horror stories. Now look at the actual data. In 2025, New York recorded 688 shootings, the fewest in the city's recorded history. Murders dropped 20% in a single year. December 2025 had the fewest shootings of any month ever measured. Among America's 50 biggest cities, New York now has the 8th lowest murder rate. The scariest big city in America is statistically one of the safest. Now to be fair, felony assaults are still elevated, up over 40% since 2019, and that's exactly why the fear feels real on the street. The perception and the statistics are both true at the same time, but the headline trend is undeniable. The city is not spiraling into chaos. It's the opposite. The offices, recovering. Vacancy is falling, leasing just hit its strongest pace in nearly 20 years, and empty towers are being converted into thousands of apartments. Congestion pricing, the $9 toll to drive into Manhattan, cut traffic by 11%, raised over $500 million in its first year, and pushed subway ridership to nearly 1.3 billion rides, the highest since 2019. Even the politics revolve around one issue now. The new mayor won on a single promise: make the city affordable. Freeze rents on 1 million stabilized apartments. Build 200,000 affordable homes in a decade with $22 billion behind it. Will it work? Economists are skeptical. You can freeze prices, but you can't freeze a shortage. The only real cure is building more homes. And that brings us to the number I promised you at the beginning. Because after everything you just heard, the $4,722 rents, the $111 billion fleeing to Florida, the $10 billion budget hole, the ocean rising inch by inch, you would expect New York's population to be collapsing. Every incentive says leave. Here's the actual number. New York City's own planners project the population will not shrink. It will grow, from about 8.5 million today to nearly 9 million by 2035, 9.1 million by 2040, and close to 9.5 million by 2055. Think about what that means. The most expensive city in America, the city drowning in budget gaps, the city with water literally rising around it, and the demographic forecast says 1 million more people are coming, not leaving, coming. Why? Because New York runs on a fuel that no other American city has ever matched: immigration. 37% of New Yorkers were born in another country in the 1970s, when the city was broke, burning, and lost 800,000 residents. Its immigrant population still grew by 250,000. Whenever New York bleeds, the world transfuses it. That has been true for 200 years, and nothing in the data says it's stopping. So here's my verdict for 2036. New York will not collapse, but it also won't be comfortable. Picture it. A city of 9 million people, still the financial capital of the planet, still setting tourism and Wall Street records. While a $52 billion wall rises out of its harbor, while the middle class fights for apartments that don't exist, while every budget season becomes a knife fight. Not a dying empire, not a golden age. A superpower under siege. Winning, but paying a brutal price for every single year of victory. The empires of history fell when people stopped believing in them and stopped showing up. By that measure, New York's greatest threat isn't the water and it isn't the budget. It's the day the world stops wanting in. And that day, according to every number we have, is nowhere in sight. But here's the question that will decide everything, and I want your answer. If you had the choice, knowing everything you now know, would you move to New York in 2036? Or would you watch it from a safe distance? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this changed how you see the world's capital, subscribe. Because next, we're putting another giant city on trial, and its numbers are even crazier than these.